Hey guys, Philosopher here, and today I am unveiling my Young Avengers infographic and really talking about how to build this team. And I have to say, this team is a real example of why I take my time before I make these infographics, because boy, has my view of this team changed a lot since it entered the game. Just so you know, this infographic is not just my work, it is the work of a lot of folks on my channel, and then a lot of players that I actually got advice from. So what I do is, I work with folks on my channel. We'll come up with a consensus view. Then I will show it to a number of different players that I respect. I'll get their feedback and try to create a consensus list. So that's really what this represents here. Let's take a look now, at this team, and you can see how big I have it. I will just say that the team at the levels that I'm seeing it is this team that I have with all gear tier 15, 6 stars on Echo, 7 on the rest, is actually smaller than many of them that I'm seeing at the level of war that I'm at. People are really building this team large, and this team scales really, really well with gear and red stars and T4s. So one thing I'm just going to say as a starting point is that this team requires a lot of investment. So if you don't have a ton of extra gear, if you're not in an endgame alliance, if you're not wailing out, you really should be careful about how high you build this team. The recommendations in this infographic are based on sort of how the team scales over time, because I think I want to build an infographic that is going to last the test of time. And as we get more gear, as we get ISO, blue level 4 and 5 and this and that, this team is going to get actually stronger as it gets more gear, because it just has so much sustainability. In other words, it has so much healing, and it has so much cleansing and other things that make the team, keep on going and outlast a lot of other opponents. And so, that is why I have made the recommendations I have in this infographic. So that's the first thing I want to say. You're going to see, for example, on this infographic, a lot of essential T4s. And I really tried hard to get this list down. I tried to, I really asked some tough questions of people. Do we really think that, Kate's special or something is essential? And I think the reality is, if you are turned off by the number of T4s in this team, you probably shouldn't go hard on it. The reality is, I think this is a go big or go home sort of team. If you have a 300K, 400K team, it's going to get beaten by, X Factor with Zemo or something. But if you create some massive team, then it requires Weapon X to beat. So that is really, what you need to do to make this team strong. And if the advice in here is going to help you if you want to just sort of, kind of put a little bit of effort into it and get a half result, but it's going to work much, much better if you actually go full in on the team. So that's why there's a lot of essentials. That's why the team is what it is here. All right, let's get right to it. So, the first essential T4 on this list is the Echo passive. So there's a couple of different ways in which this team works very well. But one thing that is very important for this team is Echo's passive damage. So this gives another 100% damage when an enemy attacks a Young Avenger ally. So instead of attacking for 150% damage, it's 250% damage, and then it's 15% damage for the entire team. I mean, that is extremely important for how this team works. So there's a lot of different components that make this team difficult. One of them is certainly all the healing and cleansing from Squirrel Girl, and other things that she does, like throwing up deflex, defense up, etc., to keep the team survivable. But definitely another piece of it is the passive damage from Echo and the other damage in the team. Okay, so that's about as essential as it gets for this team. All right, now we talked about Squirrel Girl, and Squirrel Girl really has the next two abilities. So if you see the next two essentials on there are her passive and special. So her passive is huge in terms of survivability here because it gives 15% drain to the entire team. And then this fills the speed bar by an additional 20%. Okay, so here, for example, this would ordinarily fill the speed bar by 10% when when a young Avenger falls below 50% health. But this now means, she's going to be getting speed bar 30% speed bar whenever a young Avenger ally gets under 50% health. What ends up happening as a practical matter is, because when the team gets really big, the characters, you can't get them down fast enough, and Squirrel Girl just ends up taking a ton of turns and cleansing and healing all the time. So that's why I'm saying having a bigger team really makes this team bonkers. So the drain means that more, is huge, because it means that 15% of the damage output is going to come back as healing, and then getting that additional speed bar means she's going to take more turns, and that's what this game's all about. More turns equals more things she can do. The next one here, the special, is super important, because instead of clearing just 2 negative effects from the 3 most injured allies, or clearing the 2 negative effects from all allies, here it clears all negative effects. And so going from 2 to all is huge. And in war defense, clearing negative effects before healing, that is absolutely huge as well. Because, for example, if the team gets heal block on the team, then this is going to make sure that the heal block is cleared before she tries to heal. So definitely a very vital ability. I will just say, even before this team came out, Squirrel Girl was a very strong standalone character. Now with the stat increases, she still is. So if you're somebody who can't afford to build this entire team, it's worth getting that special and passive done, and just having her as, really the one of the best cleansers in the game. All right. Now, next essential T4 we have here on the list is going to be the Miss Marvel passive. So one big way that this team ramps up damage is through Miss Marvel's assists. So if you look here at the Miss Marvel passive, she is giving assists to the entire team. This originally was the passive, giving assists now on every turn. What this does here is gives more armor and health to the entire team, 25% armor and health. But I will just say that definitely a big part, just to talk about Miss Marvel for a second. I mean, she does a couple things that are really important for the team. One is she's gaining assists now on every Young Avenger turn. And, she's granting assists now to a random ally, on her turn. So there's just tons of assists going out on this team, and that's why I have the best ISO for the team to be Striker on all except for Skirmisher and Miss Marvel. So you have a double tap whenever they're taking attack. So in other words, Squirrel Girl will go, for example, let's say Squirrel Girl is doing an attack, Miss Marvel will assist, and then Squirrel Girl will get a third attack. Okay, so she's a very important character. Another thing that she does is when we look at this, when a hero ally drops below 50% health, she gains taunt for 2 turns. And if the ally's a Young Avenger, which of course it is in this team, she's gaining 2 deflect. So she's really annoying. You kind of have to take her down early, or else you're going to spend a lot of time getting stuck behind her taunt. Okay. So definitely the passive is important just for armor and max health. That just gives a lot of sustainability. All right, let's get back up here to the essentials. All right, the America Chavez passive. This is one of the most broken passives in the game. This is another T4 that you can get and just use her as a standalone character. On war defense, on spawn, fill speed bar by 25% for adjacent allies. You put this between, let's say, the Eternals, or let's say Cersei and Dormammu, and you end up having a super strong defense. This is not confined to Young Avengers. It just works on all characters, on war defense, on spawn. And so if you don't want to build this entire team, this is a T4 you can just put down and have a standalone character that can make your war defense much stronger. But on this team, it's really important. If you look at the positioning, we have her on the positioning between Echo and Kate. She speeds them up. Okay, here in the center. You've got Miss Marvel on the end, who is the taunter. You've got Squirrel Girl all the way on the right. She's going to be cleansing and healing. And then America Chavez will speed up these two in the middle, who are, major damage dealers and problem causers for the entire team. Okay, next one on this list. Now we're going to go to Echo. And this is one where really my view of the T4s changed a lot as I was, as I was using the team and going up against the team and talking to others. So I have the special and the basic, and there's an argument about exactly where these go in terms of being essential. But first of all, this is the turn one ability, and so it is very strong, and you want to get this out. You want to get this out quickly. You also want, instead of one evade, you want to have the second evade. Okay, so this does not just chain to the additional target, but it also gives you an additional evade, which is, I think, a very important thing here. I'm actually going to pull it up since it's not visible on the screen. I'm gonna bring it up on msf.gg so we can see exactly what the ability does. I want you to see why. There you go. Why I have the C apply +2 evade. This is really important. So this happens on turn one, and she puts up 2 evade on the entire team. This first of all means that Weapon X actually can lose if you misplay it. If your ability blocking the wrong character, it also means that it just adds a ton of sustainability to the team overall to have 2 evade instead of 1 up in the beginning. And so this is pretty much necessary as far as I'm concerned. The ult is much less of a priority, even though it does a lot of damage on paper, just because getting the additional evade is good. And this is the turn 1 ability. So this is what's going to be, making a difference right in the beginning of the match. Okay. Now, the next one is the Echo Basic. This is another one that, if I was just if people giving their initial impressions before they play the team, it doesn't seem all that important. But she just is attacking constantly. So that's the thing here. So this is 110% damage, but the thing is, she is attacking all the time. She's attacking constantly, and this makes her, assist, counter, etc., stronger. So when she is doing all of her additional attacks, it is stronger when you put the T4 on. So she's just a character that is constantly throwing out attacks. And so even though this seems unimpressive on paper, it's like, okay, wait, Philosopher, it's just 110% damage. When you actually play the team, it's important. And so I know some of you get mad at me because you're like, Philosopher, there's another guy who got his infographic out before the team was even released, and why are you waiting a month and a half? Well, this is why. Because I prefer to just get it right for, in terms of what I think, why I think I want these to be accurate. These are going to get passed around for months, and so I really want them to be accurate if you're going to be relying on them. All right, so Echo Basic pretty much was very unanimous when I was talking to savvy players that's really important. Why do you have Echo Basic so low? Like, everybody was talking about that. So there are some people who thought it should even go higher. All right, let's talk about the Kate Bishop abilities. All 4 of them are good, and I thought about moving them into the nice to have. All of them are good. None of them are like super, like the best one on the team. But when I was talking to people, I came to the conclusion that if I took these out of Essential, I'm basically advising you that you can make this team sort of on the cheap. And this is not a skimpy kind of team. This is a team you kind of have to go hard on if you want to get good results. You're going to get a lot more for your investment if you go hard on the team. That's just the way that this team was designed. So here, this one I think is really important in getting speed up for 2 turns instead of 1 turn on the ultimate. And it also, of course, gives 50% piercing to all enemies. So that's the one that I put first. You could probably change the order on some of these. The passive, applying offense up for 2 turns instead of 1 turn. That is, by the way, another 50% damage for a second turn. And then also, by the way, this also means that her out-of-turn damage that she does, where she does piercing, blind, and slow whenever a young Avenger ally dies or drops below 50% health, which by the way is a very annoying ability. You know, in the middle of a fight, suddenly you're one of your big damagers will get blind or something like that. It adds a lot of RNG to this fight, which is good for war defense. You know, instead of making it 150% piercing, it's 200% piercing. So this is a very important ability. All of these, like I said, are very important, but they're not the most essential, but they really make the team way better. Way better. It's just really hard for me to say that you don't want these. If you're really going to build the team, you just gotta splurge on these T4s. The basic, you know, applying taunt on targets. So, you know, not only is she attacking and clearing positive effects, but then she's chaining and putting taunt on targets. This can totally screw up the opposing team. So these abilities from her do things like add RNG to a fight where, you know, that's how you get war defense wins. In other words, the way that you lose with your war defense team is if your team is entirely predictable and is easily controlled, right? Because then the other team just chooses the right counter and they execute the turns in the right order and they get their result. The stuff like the taunt or the adding the, you know, having more damage on that blind, they can potentially make it so something random is happening that makes it tough. So like, for example, if the wrong character gets taunt, you know, it could totally screw up your opponent because their healer gets taunted and then their healer gets focused down by the Young Avengers, that sort of thing. So this is a sort of sneaky good ability. All right, and the specials, the last one. This is very nice. If this character has charge, apply offense up for 2 turns. This is sort of like how the passive, you know, is giving the offense up. The reason I like offense up is because, you know, it's 50% more damage, it's 50% more focus to land debuffs and so forth. And, you know, it applies, it's like an always on thing. It applies no matter what, no matter who's using their ability, no matter who's doing the damage. So keeping offense up on the team constantly is going to make your team a lot better. All right, now we're going to move to the nice to have T4s. I mean, I will just tell you that there are players that I talk to who are like, just tell them to put everything on except with one or two exceptions. You know, that's how nice a lot of these T4s are, and they make the team a lot better. So let's go right here now to the Miss Marvel basic. You may say, well, wait, Philosopher, the Miss Marvel basic? Like, all this is getting a deflect and doing a little bit of damage. Why would you do that? Well, she is assisting constantly. Like I said, that is the way that this team works, is there's constant assists coming out with Miss Marvel. And so this makes those stronger, and it means that you're getting more deflects and so on. So it just makes the team way better if you have this T4. I even considered putting this in the essential. There's some people who believe so strongly in this particular T4 that they were convincing me that maybe it's essential. And I had to draw the line somewhere, so I drew it here, but it's quite good. It's another one that's sneaky good where, you know, if somebody's just looking at it on paper, it doesn't sound that great. But when you actually play against the team and see how often Miss Marvel's doing assists, it actually becomes quite important. All right, the next one on the list is the Squirrel Girl Ultimate. And this is I think the definition of nice to have. If you look at it, you know, this one does a ton of damage does 50% damage to all enemies and heal block for 2 turns. Do you need heal block for 2 turns versus 1 turn? No, you don't need it. You don't need the additional damage, but it just puts more pressure on the enemy. As you get more T4s on the team and as you get more gear and more red stars, this team just becomes a little overwhelming, and it reduces the number of counters that you can use against it. Obviously, over time, new teams will come out, Darkhold and so on, that will be able to beat this team, but you want this to draw as expensive of a counter as possible, right? As tough of an counter as possible, and abilities like this really help with that. All right, next one is the America Chavez special. I had some people suggesting this should go higher as well. I mean, this one, you know, just does a lot of damage. It does a lot of damage because you're going to have 4 allies, so it's 150% additional damage, which is a lot to get out of a T4, and then it just can kill somebody. And so, you know, I think America Chavez, outside of her passive, just basically is providing damage. She's not like super important, to this team compared to some of the others other than that passive, but this definitely does do a lot of damage. And I think it's a definition of a nice to have sort of ability, in my opinion. The next one is the Squirrel Girl basic. And this is another one where, it's definitely very nice to have. I mean, you're always applying offense down instead of a 50% chance to apply offense down. It's very nice. And, you can, you certainly, more people now are switching her from healer to striker. I've not done it yet because I'm cheap with my ions, but a lot of people have been doing that. So they get the double tap here and they get a little bit more damage out of her as well. So there are some people who are like, you should just do all the basics. I understand that for many of you, you're like, wait, this is way too many T4s. I don't have all these T4s sitting around, Philosopher. I got all these other teams to build. That's why this team is not for you. And I will just say I'm putting all of this in the video so that you learn and understand that this is a team that really benefits. It's very T4 intensive and Red Star and gear intensive. So don't go hard on it unless you really are committed. But this one is just good from that perspective. I haven't even done this one. All right. Next year we have the Echo Ultimate. This is one that I did in my experimental phase here. This is one that I did, Echo Ultimate, because I said, okay, when I first unlocked the character, I'm like, oh, this looks great. There's a lot of damage. Just if you do the math on paper, this seems like amazing because it just does an insane amount of damage when you calculate it up, much more than some of the abilities before it. But it doesn't come turn one. By the time she gets to it, it's sort of like either a win more move, like you've already won and this doesn't really do much, or you're already lost the match and it's not a difference maker. So this is nice to have. I mean, there could be a match that gets down to this, but it's one of those ones where if you're doing a list on paper, you might rank this much higher, but in practice, it's not as impactful. It's just a nice to have. All right, and then the Miss Marvel Ultimate. This one is another just nice to have, in my opinion. I haven't done this one. And this is just 20% damage to all enemies and then 20% chance to generate ability energy, which she generates on her ultimate. I just going from 40 to 60. I don't, I think that's nice, but I don't think it's worth being essential. I mean, it's definitely, and obviously more energy is nice to have, but I don't think it's enough. 20% is enough to make this an essential ability. And then we get into what I'll call the bad, not the bad, but the T4s. So these two are just in my opinion, although there are people doing these as well. One is the America Chavez basic. Some people are just doing these because they think that the basics with all of the assisting is just worth doing on this team. There's some people who have taken that position. Some people who wanted to have the basics much higher in advance. I just feel like you get so little out of this one that you could skip it. The ultimate is another one, just 80% damage. To me, that's very mediocre. 80% damage to one target. And then there's one, I rarely do this on an infographic where I say that there's a trash T4, but this is one of the worst T4s in the game is the Miss Marvel special. Under no circumstances should you be investing in the Miss Marvel special T4. This is just 6,000 healing, and nowadays the health pools are several 100,000 big, so this is just nothing. Okay, this is sort of something they left in from when the game was, when these characters were at a different spot. Back before a lot of power creep. All right, so let's take a look here back at the infographic for a minute. Punk, of course, did an amazing job, as usual, on this infographic. We've already talked about some of the other things on here. I want to talk about gear priority for a second. This is another one that I debated with some folks. In my experience, a big Squirrel Girl really changes the fight. If you have a 7 Red Star Squirrel Girl or something, and you just have a humongous gear, the gear on the character, I think she's going to make the fight a lot more difficult, because ultimately what makes this team so hard is all the sustain and the damage over time that they do. So a big Squirrel Girl makes the biggest difference. And you're going to have a lot of players trying to aim your Squirrel Girl, particularly if your team isn't super large. They're going to aim your Squirrel Girl quickly and try to get that character down. So having her survive longer is going to help. Miss Marvel, she was one that I originally had a little lower on here, but really, not only is she going to be assisting constantly, but she's the one who's going to be taunting and sort of is going to be the annoying one that your opponent's forced to kill fairly early in the fight. And so after really spending some time talking to folks and running through some matches, I think that this is the right order here. Kate and Echo, I think there's some argument to be made that these two could be flipped. They both are very important sources of damage and other things on the team, like evades from Echo, and Kate does a lot with her charges. America Chavez, least important to gear on this team. She's most useful for her passive. Positioning we already talked about. You're going to have Miss Marvel taunting on the end. You'll have Squirrel on the other end. America Chavez will speed up Echo and Kate. And then we talked already about the ISO classes. This setup is really what people are moving to, and I know that's different than what you might have. This is why I always say my ISO is initial impression, and then it's after a lot of testing that I put these out. And the reason why is just having the triple tap is way more valuable than having a little bit of additional healing from Squirrel Girl. All right, guys. I hope you liked this video. This was a lot of work went into this. More are on the way. I'm working on Dark Hunters and others that are coming out very, very soon. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, smash that like button. Subscribe to this channel. If you have comments, questions, cheers, jeers, happy, sad, angry, mad, put it below or go to my Discord. That is linked below. You can also go to my Twitch stream. That is linked below too.